Looks like we are going live and you can start whenever you're ready.
Okay.
See, well, you know what? Since it's 2 p.m., right on the clock, let's get started. So, good afternoon, everybody. Once again, we're back to another very nice session of Reyes. Welcome to those of you that are joining us for the first time. If you don't know me by now, again, my name is Orlando Ayala. I'm an associate professor at the Engineering Technology Department here at Old Dominion University. Once again, I'll be serving as a moderator for another Reyes session, and this one is titled "From Rocket and Biodiesel to Airplanes and Acoustics and a Mathematician's Journey." It always fascinated me, and I'm sure to you as well, to learn stories about anyone who has been successful in their careers. But what is most interesting to me is to learn how they got there. So our speaker today will take us through her journey that took her to NASA. I'm pretty sure you're gonna enjoy and learn a lot from her. Our speaker is Dr. Michelle Rodio. She's a research as an aerospace engineer in the computational aeroscience branch at the NASA Langley Research Center in Hampton, right here next to ODU. She has served the country as a NASA civil servant since August 2016, where she was a member of the Langley High Performance Computer Incubator. By the way, that team was awarded with the NASA Honor Award, as well as the Administrator's Years of Government Initiative Award in 2019. Michelle has also participated in interdisciplinary research team that study fields of acoustics, computational mechanics, and high-performance computing to develop acquire next-generation aircraft. I'm looking forward to that one because they're very loud at times, huh? In her current job, Dr. Rodio supports the post-processing and documentation of high-lift common research model acoustics wind tunnel test campaign. She also supports the electric power train flight demonstration and advanced air transport technology projects by predicting noise signatures via high-fidelity aerospace simulation. I mean, as you could see, she's very active. And if I have to, and she also, but before I say one more thing, let me clarify, let me say that Michelle earned her PhD and Master Science in Computational Mechanics from Old Dominion University in 2020 and 2015, so go Monarchs. And she got the master's degree in Mechanical Engineering 2012 from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. As you have heard me talking about the whole story, in few words, she is amazing, and I'm pretty sure you're gonna enjoy her talk. We will start the presentation with that will last about 30 minutes. Then we're gonna switch to questions from the audience, and please feel free to start sending questions through the chat to the Q&A button that you have at the bottom. Dr. Rodio will answer as many questions as possible during this last part of our segment. And without further ado, you have Dr. Michelle Rodio. So Michelle, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining my talk. I'm really excited to share with you my journey through STEM. So my talk today is going to be a lot of the history over the last 15 years of my life to show how I got to where I am, and then a little bit of science lessons along the way from different projects I worked on. So as our moderator said, I am currently at NASA Langley Research Center. It's just down the road from Old Dominion University. I'm in the Computational Aerosciences branch, and inside that branch, I am a research aerospace engineer. A fun fact about NASA Langley Research Center, we are the oldest NASA center in the country. In 2017, we celebrated our 100th year anniversary, and you can see the photo that I have at the bottom of the slide. That's all the employees standing to take a photograph, spelling out 100 for 100 years. So that was a pretty neat experience to be at the NASA Langley Research Center during that historic moment in time. So what do I work on? What does a research aerospace engineer do? Well, research aerospace engineers do lots of fun, exciting projects. What I do specifically, because I have a lot of different experience in aeronautics, mechanical engineering, and math, I use what I've learned about aeronautics, computers, high performance computing, and math to study how much noise an airplane makes, not necessarily from the engine, but the way that it's designed. So as the airplane is flying above you through the clouds, where it's landing and where it's taking off, how the air moves around the body and how the different components of the airplane itself, like the wings or the landing gear, what components of that generate a lot of noise, and what we can do to figure out how to design those components better to reduce that sound. And most recently in my position, I was doing wind tunnel testing, and I'll explain a little bit of that in a few slides, but I have some photos on this slide to indicate what test I was working on. And so I was inside the 14 by 22 wind tunnel, and on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see an image of that wind tunnel. It's a very large wind tunnel. And inside the wind tunnel, we have a semi-span model. What semi-span means, it's essentially an airplane cut in half long ways and put on its side, as you can see in the pictures. And there is a large fan that generates airflow through the entire wind tunnel. And inside this wind tunnel, we measured using a microphone array, as you can see in the center image, the sound that came off of the airplane model. And we were able to figure out what different parts of the airplane were the noisiest, so that way we can move forward with designing quieter airplanes. So with that, I have a video that I created with some coworkers just a few months ago. So I'm going to play this, and this explains a little bit more about the wind tunnel and the project that I have been working on for the last several months.
Hi, my name is Dr. Michelle Rodeo. I am a research aerospace engineer at the NASA Langley Research Center. I'm a trained mathematician, and I look at computational air acoustics problems. What that means is I look at the sound levels from different aircraft, and I try to figure out what components of an aircraft are the noisiest and why, and how we can reduce that sound for our community population. I'm on center today, and I want to bring you in and show you around and tell you about some of the great work that's going on today, especially in the work that I'm doing. I am currently working in the 14 by 22 subsonic wind tunnel, which you can see just over my shoulder in this video. So come on in, I'll show you around. So I just got to the 14 by 22 wind tunnel. I'm outside the building now. We're about to go inside and meet one of the engineers I'm working with. He's a test engineer. He's going to show us the wind tunnel, give us a little bit of information about how it works, and you'll get to see the model that I'm working on.
Hello everyone, my name is Brennan Caudill. I'm a test engineer at the 14 by 22 subsonic wind tunnel. A wind tunnel is an environment where we simulate a flow. We can go up to about 230 miles per hour. 14 by 22 is a closed loop tunnel, meaning that the air goes in a loop from a fan that drives the air through a couple turning vanes, a settling chamber, and the test section.
Let's go see.
So right here is where we have our settling chamber. Pretty much this is where air passes through, slows down right before it goes into our test section. So this is the test section for 14 by 22. Right now we are in an open configuration, meaning we have all this room to test. We also have a closed test section where we have walls coming from the ceiling to the floor. When those walls come down and the ceiling comes down, we have a dimension of 14 by 22, which is where the tunnel gets its name. You can see a model that we have installed right now in the tunnel. This model is a semi-span, like we discussed, coming from the floor. Going up, we have air coming from our inlet over the model and through our exits, going through our flow collector to try again stabilize the air.
So inside the wind tunnel right now, we have an aircraft model on the floor, and what we can do is as the flow moves over the model, we can simulate using mathematics and computers how noisy different components of the aircraft are. And we do that using our microphone array.
Okay, so hopefully you guys learned a little bit about the wind tunnel and the model that I'm working on. So, oh, hopefully you can still see my screen. If not, please do let me know. But so that is the aircraft model that I've been working on for the last several months. And we're now in the
Michelle, we
process.
don't see your screen right now.
Okay, let me retry to share. My apologies. Can you see it now?
It's kind of blurred and here it comes.
Okay. Is it working?
Yeah, now we see it.
Okay, great. Apologies, I think something happened when the video stopped. So that is just a quick video I made with some coworkers to explain what it is that we were testing for the last several months. And it was a kind of a way to give a virtual tour of our facility, because again, we've been closed for the last year and a half to very limited amount of personnel because of COVID. So we thought that would be a nice little fun way to give a virtual tour of our center and the tests that we're doing. But so that's the work that I'm doing currently at NASA Langley Research Center. So how did I get here? As you heard in my bio, I've studied a lot of different topics and I've worked on a lot of different projects. So I'm going to just walk you through a timeline to show you just the path that I took to get to where I am today and to give you a little bit of lessons learned as I go along my way. So how did I get to where I am now? So in 2006, I graduated high school and I enrolled at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. That was in Daytona Beach, Florida. So I traveled about 1,000 miles away from my hometown to go to college. And when I went there, I studied aerospace engineering, and it was a great program. I met a lot of great people who are now working all across the aviation industry. And after my second year of school there, I got my first summer internship at Lockheed Martin Transportation and Security Systems. And that was really close to where I grew up in New Jersey. And when I was working there, I was looking at all of the software applications that our air traffic controllers use. Air traffic controllers are the people who sit inside of the towers and they talk to the pilots and they help to moderate the airplane traffic. It's just flying into the airport, leaving the airport, and then navigating between airports. And a lot of this work, we don't see a lot of the traffic from the ground, but there's a lot of safety that goes into making sure that the airplanes maintain a certain distance from each other and to make sure that the pilots all know where they are in the sky. And this is a lot of work done in computer simulations. And so what I did during this internship is I looked at that computer software and I would help test it and I would help to debug it. So I would find faults in the system, locate them, and help to figure out how to make that system safer for both the pilots and the air traffic controllers using it. So that was a great summer internship, again, after my sophomore year of college. And then when I was a junior, I went to the career fair at my university and I met this gentleman. I began talking to him about my experience and where I wanted to work. I told him that I had been wanting to work for NASA since I was about in 5th grade. And I just loved the space shuttle program because when I was in college, we were still having the space shuttle program where we would launch astronauts from NASA Kennedy Space Center in Florida to the International Space Station. And he went back to his boss that evening and said, hey, this girl I met, Michelle, she would be a great fit for our group. And I got a phone interview the next day. And just a few months later, I began an internship with United Space Alliance at the NASA Kennedy Space Center. And I started that at the second half of my junior year of college. And because this was only about an hour's worth drive from my university, I was able to work there through the bulk of my junior year of college, all the way through my senior year of college, and then also the summers in between and afterwards before I started graduate school. And in this position, I got to work on some amazing projects. So you can see I have a lot of
Cannot hear anything. Or is it me?
Michelle, are you there?
Michelle?
Yeah, Let me see if I can reach her. Maybe while we wait for the speaker to reconnect, just a reminder, you're welcome to put in your questions into the Q&A box, and the speaker will get back to you as soon as we get a hold of her.
She could be talking right now, thinking that we can hear her.
Yeah, let me see if I can call her. All right, good news. She's alive. Good
That's a good start.
So just a second. She's gonna
Okay.
take it off and get started again.
Right, she's rebooting.
There we go.
What did we miss? You're muted. You're muted.
All the good
I'm
stuff.
back. I'm sorry.
This is-
Okay, technical problems. Let me retry.
As long as it doesn't happen in those airplanes you're working with.
That's true. That's true. Although if you can't hear the airplanes, then I've done my job properly, I guess.
There you go.
Okay. So you have to let me know what slide I left off on.
You were right there. But then
Right here? Okay.
but move on because it's not there.
Is the next one.
You were in the next one, I believe. There you
This
go.
one?
Keep going, keep going. Yeah, we were looking at that one. Now I don't
Okay.
recall exactly what you what you were saying when you went off, but we were right there. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I apologize. This is the nature of working virtually. This sometimes happens, but okay. So I will start back from where I was at in this slide because I'm not sure where the audio cut out. But so in 2009, my junior year of college, I went to the career fair at my university, just looking to meet some different folks and see what opportunities were out there. And I met this gentleman, and he began asking me what I was interested in working on. And I expressed to him that I had been wanting to work for NASA since I was in 5th grade. And that's essentially what brought me to the university that I was studying at. And he went back to his boss and said, hey, I met this great woman. She'd be a good fit for our group. She'd get along with everyone. And the next day I got a phone interview. 2 months later, I found myself at the NASA Kennedy Space Center working with a company called the United Space Alliance. And I was in this position from the middle of my junior year of college through just the beginning of graduate school. So I got to work during junior year of college. I took the semester off, and I actually was able to get some credits from during this internship. I worked the summer until senior year, all the way through senior year, and then the summer before I started grad school. Luckily, my university was only about an hour's drive away from the Kennedy Space Center, so I was able to go to class on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I was able to do class Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and work here Tuesday, Thursday. So it was a great experience for me. In this position, the bulk of my work was looking at engineering drawings from our design engineers, and I would help to build a workflow to build the solid rocket booster. So the top right image is me sitting in front of the solid rocket booster. There were two solid rocket boosters on either side of the external tank, which you can see in the center image. And we would build these from the ground up. They were manufactured in different pieces, kind of like Legos, all around the country, and they'd be shipped to the Kennedy Space Center. And I would help to build it from the ground up so that way we could launch the astronaut safely. But since I was an intern, I got to do a lot of really cool tours. As you can see in the left image, I am sitting in what's called a bunny suit inside of the commander seat of the orbiter Atlantis. And we wear a bunny suit to protect against foreign foreign object debris. So any particles that might fall off, dust on your clothes. When you go into a zero gravity environment, all that begins floating around the orbiter. So we wear these protective outfits to protect any dust and what we call FOD, that foreign object debris, from getting around the orbiter. So I was able to do a lot of great stuff, and I was working with some classmates of mine from schools in the bottom right image. So this was a great 2-year experience for me, and I really cherished every moment that I had there. And during that time, I also was able to graduate from Embry-Riddle with a Bachelor of Science in Aerospace Engineering. And there I am with my parents. It was a very exciting day for me in Florida to graduate, especially since I was still able to work at Kennedy Space Center during that entire time. And also during that time, I even was able to pass my private pilot check ride. So while I was in school, a lot of the classmates of mine at my university were studying to get their pilot's license, and they all now fly for a lot of different airlines around the country. And when I was at Kennedy Space Center, actually one of my coworkers was a flight instructor. So after work some days, I would take flight lessons from him. So just shortly after I graduated, I also then passed my private pilot check ride. So you can see some nice images of me flying around sunny Florida on the East Coast. The plane was very old, as you can see from the instrument panel on the bottom picture. But this was a great experience for me because not only was I studying how to build and design airplanes and learn the aerodynamics of them, I got to feel it and know how the plane moves in the air by controlling it myself. So I was able to get a lot of experience in learning the aerodynamics of airplanes by then pursuing my pilot's license. So during that entire time, I had also then decided I wanted to continue studying engineering, but I wanted to broaden my experience. So I applied to graduate school also at Embry-Riddle, and I decided to then study mechanical engineering for my master's degree. And the summer into enrolling in this program, I was watching a show on the Discovery Channel where these people found they used fat from pigs, and they were able to convert it into a fuel to run lawnmowers. It's like, wow, that's really, really interesting work. And luckily for me, my program was focused on clean energy. So my first semester there, I did a research project on biodiesel, and I decided to make that my thesis work. And in your master's degree, your thesis work is a project that you do at the culmination of your degree. And it can be work that has been done by other people before. You can replicate it and kind of take your own little spin on it. And so a lot of the work that I was doing was going to our cafeteria on the university campus, which used about 1,600 gallons of cooking oil annually to feed all of us really hungry graduate students. And I took that cooking oil, I recycled it from the university kitchens, and I would create biodiesel to then use on our lawn equipment itself. So that was a great project for me. And I'll go into a little bit of more details of that in a few slides. And so graduate school was a 2-year program. And in the summer between my first and my second year, I got a second internship with Lockheed Martin, this time at their missiles and fire control facility. And here I was working at the manufacturing lab for a lot of our missiles and safety for our Department of Defense. So I was able to directly support our US military working in this manufacturing lab. And I got to see from like the itty little circuit boards level of how these advanced systems are built. So I worked on this very large project and program launching astronauts to the International Space Station, and got to work on these enormous parts and pieces. And in this position, I was looking at just little circuit boards and working with my hands to go to the tiniest components of the vehicles that were being designed by Lockheed Martin. So towards the end of my graduate program, we officially had our grand opening of the biodiesel production facility, which was the bulk of my work. When I had began to research making biodiesel, our university didn't have the capability of producing it. So in the 2 years of my learning how to make biodiesel, I was also going through the process of safety inspections, personnel safety, and facility production to build our own biodiesel facility. And just a few months before I graduated, we had our grand opening. That's me cutting the ribbon with our university vice president and a local person in our city government. And so this was a great experience to, after 2 years, officially have a grand opening facility at our university. And you can see just behind us, the facility with our first 40 gallons of biodiesel. Just a few months later, I graduated with my master's degree in mechanical engineering, and you can see two of my professors there. They were great mentors of mine. And about a year later, I decided I wasn't done studying. I wanted to continue learning. And that was when I decided to enroll at the university that I just recently graduated from, Old Dominion University. And here I decided I wanted to continue broadening my experience. And I wanted to then change, again, my major to computational mathematics. And this is probably one of the best decisions I made in my career path. When I was studying mechanical engineering, I took a graduate level class in mathematics and completely fell in love. And that was really the impetus that pushed me to want to get my PhD in mathematics. So the picture on the bottom right, that was my very first day of school. And I was incredibly excited to start this new journey, not knowing where it was going to take me or where I was going to end up at the end of it. Just a few months later, I was actually able to get a second internship, this time at the NASA Langley Research Center. And little did they know when they hired me in January 2014 that I was never going to leave, and I have not left a day since. I also have a very first day picture. And this position brought me through a lot of different experiences and programs. I met some of my closest friends, and one of my younger sisters worked with me there in the top right image. That's me and my younger sister. And some of these pictures here are me traveling to different conferences with my coworkers, some of my branch mates. And the position that I did here lasted for just over 2 years. In this position, I was looking at hypersonic vehicles. So hypersonic vehicles are vehicles that fly more than 5 times faster than the speed of sound. And when you fly that fast, the outsides of these vehicles get very, very hot. And so this position, I was looking at how the material on the outside became hot and how we could measure that temperature change so that we could make sure that the vehicle was still structurally safe and sound, and that for anyone flying in them, that they were protected as well from that extreme heat. So I did a lot of heat analysis with this position. Just shortly after, I graduated with a master's degree in mathematics, and I took what was called the PhD qualifying exams. When you decide to do your PhD program, you have to take different examinations. Different schools do it slightly differently depending on the program. But in late 2015, I passed these qualifying exams, officially became a PhD student. And around that time, I then started my second position, also at the NASA Langley Research Center, but I switched from doing heat analysis to looking at high performance computing. And so this is the group I joined, and I was in this position for about 3 years. And this is when I became what's called a pathway student. This is a civil service position, so officially working for the federal government. And the group that I was in was a workforce training development program focused on learning how to do parallel programming and use a lot of these high-end software simulations on these advanced computers around the world so that way we can solve science faster. So these are some of the pictures of my coworkers, and I also got really involved in our employee resource groups to support diversity and inclusion efforts on center. And so this was a really great learning experience for me, both professionally and socially with work on how to work in these large, diverse groups and promote women in STEM, which is incredibly important to me. So towards the end of 2017, I finally finished all my classes. So this was about 3 years into my program, and I passed what's called my proposal defense. So this was me sharing my research idea to my university department faculty and saying, this is what I would like to do with my PhD, this is what I would like to study, and getting the go-ahead from them to continue on with my research. So this was towards the end of 2018, and that was a really, really exciting day for me. One of my other sisters came to watch, and that was really nice having that support system for me through all these years. Fast forward a few years, now my timeline's getting stretched out because during this time I was doing a lot of research and that took a bit of time. And then COVID happened, as we all know. Luckily for me, or I guess unluckily, however you want to look at it, my defense for my dissertation was the very first week that school closed. So like I'm presenting to you today, I presented on the couch with a blanket over my legs, similar to me right now. Luckily then I did not have any audio problems. I was able to defend and share my presentation with no issues. So that was March 2020, and that was one of the best days of my research life was able to share all of the work that I had been doing for almost 7 years at that point and say, this is the work that I've been doing. I'm very passionate about it. And officially the first day where I was able to be called doctor. Okay, so then I graduated, but again, because it was COVID, I was not able to actually have a ceremony. So my close friend and I, we made little diplomas for ourselves and had a little day of celebration for us, since we weren't able to actually graduate in person because of the pandemic that we were in. But that didn't stop me. I still earned my degree and I began applying to different positions at, again, still at Langley Research Center, because as I mentioned, when they hired me in 2014, they weren't able to get rid of me. I've been there for 7 years now. I applied for different positions, and in late September, I was hired into the group that I'm in now, again, the Computational Error Sciences branch. And once COVID, once all the vaccines were able to come out, our university was finally able to have a ceremony. So my friend and I were able to actually have a ceremony and graduate together and put our gowns on. So that was a nice experience for us. So that's been the last 15 years. You know, I've had a lot of different experiences, a lot of different work projects that I was working on, and it's brought me through a lot of different paths. And during all this, what did I learn? I, of course, learned more than just the programs I was studying, aerospace, mechanical, and math, but there was a lot of life lessons that I learned. So when I was working at the Kennedy Space Center, not only did I learn how to build and safely launch a rocket, but I also learned how to work in a very diverse team and how to budget my time. So as I mentioned, I was working at Kennedy Space Center while I was in school. So I got to work on this amazing program and supplement a lot of the work that I was learning in my class with what I was doing actually at my job. And of course, wanting to work for NASA, meeting astronauts is meeting your heroes every day. So I got to meet a lot of astronauts, as you can see at the bottom of the slide. And those were some of the best days, actually being able to talk to the astronauts who I was building this program and working this program for, to make sure that they came home safely to their families. But because I was in school at the same time, I really had to learn how to budget my time. So if anything, doing everything that I learned at school and inside the work, I had a lot of professional experience, but I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not learned how to budget my time properly. Because I mentioned I was working part-time at Kennedy Space Center while also finishing my senior year school activities. I was taking flying lessons. I was involved in a lot of activities at school. I was still in full-time coursework. And then I was also on the track team. So early on in my career, my education, I learned very fast how to budget my time and how to, you know, accomplish the goals that I wanted to in a way that allowed me to continue having the life that I wanted to live inside my classroom and with my friends, and inside physical, mental, and emotional health, which is incredibly important. Okay, what else did I learn? When I was making biodiesel from the ground up, again, as I mentioned, I had built this facility from nothing. I learned how to, you know, design this entire facility, look at the safety requirements, which is incredibly important when you work in engineering. But I also learned how to never give up when the going gets tough. And I'll explain that in a second. So as I mentioned, I was going to give a little bit of lessons as we go through. How did we make biodiesel? I talked about this for a bit. It essentially comes down to, you take an oil or an animal fat known as a triglyceride, and it's made through this process called transesterification. And it just requires a few ingredients. So you take this triglyceride, either animal fat or vegetable oil. In my case, I was using peanut oil from our Chick-fil-A on campus. You mix that with methanol and you add a catalyst. What a catalyst does in a chemical experiment is it increases the rate of reaction, and it allows for the reaction to take place. And what I used as my catalyst is sodium hydroxide. You could also use potassium hydroxide. But you first take this oil, you filter out, you make sure it's free of any water or food contaminants, because again, I was using used cooking oil. And then you perform a titration experiment, which I'm doing on the top image. And this tells you how much catalyst you need for the chemical to actually convert into biodiesel. And through this process, you once you figure out how much catalyst you need for the reaction to take place, you mix that with your triglyceride, again, the oil and the methanol, and eventually it forms into two substances, biodiesel and glycerin. Once they settle out into two different components, you can drain the glycerin, wash the biodiesel, and boom, there you have it. Now, having these steps is really nice. It's 5 steps, it's 4 ingredients or 3 ingredients. Should seem easy, right? Unfortunately, my school did not have a chemistry department because we were an aeronautical university. And so I did not have a lot of people I could go to for some help. So it took me quite a bit of time to get it right. So this is one of the first attempts I made at making biodiesel. As you can see, there's in the first image on the left, there's a lot of different food particles, and there's a lot of what we call gunk in there. And knowing how to, clean that, wash that, and make sure that doesn't affect the reaction was quite challenging. And so not only did I learn how to make biodiesel, but I learned how to work through a lot of the problems and adversity that I was facing in the project, push through and continue working. As you can see, I had almost a half a jar full of biodiesel, or I've used cooking oil from the beginning. It's mixed with a lot of contaminants. And through the process, I created a lot of things called emulsions. Emulsions are what's formed if you don't have your ingredients correct. So it's kind of like if you make cookies or pancakes or whatnot. If you use too many eggs or if you use too much flour, the cookies and the pancakes don't come out tasting correctly. So in the same process, if I'm using too much catalyst or if I didn't clean all the food particles out, we get what's called an emulsion. And this is when it doesn't react quite properly. And you don't really get the exact amount of product that you want. So as you can see, I barely ended up with less than 1/4 of the container of biodiesel. So my first attempt didn't go well. A few attempts later, it still was not going well. This time I didn't even get what we called emulsions. I didn't even know what to qualify it as other than gunk. So as you can see, there was, even though this was, 3 ingredients, 5 steps, seemed easy from the beginning, and I thought this is a really cool project. It was one of the hardest projects I worked on in my life. And to this day, I will still say that. I drove around with biodiesel in the back of my car and cooking oil for about 2 years, trying to figure out how to get this to work in my dorm room late at night. But through adversity, I continued pushing through, continued learning more about the chemical process on my own, doing a lot of research. And eventually I was able to create good biodiesel. And it really taught me never to give up when you're faced with a challenge and you're not quite sure what to do. You keep researching. Because I had mentioned at the end, I was able to successfully make biodiesel and open a facility on campus. So as you can see behind me on the left image, that was my first 40-gallon batch, no emulsions, no gunk. It worked out really well. And on February 22nd, we had our facility grand opening. We took that biodiesel out, put it in the tractor and turned it on. And I think my heart stopped for a second, not knowing if the engine was going to turn on because we didn't test it out beforehand. But it turned on and we were able to power our lawn equipment with this biodiesel that I made. So that was a great lessons learned for me over those few years. Okay, what else did I learn? As I mentioned, the first internship I had at Langley was looking at high temperature materials. So not only did I learn about heat transfer, but I also learned how to speak to an international audience. So budgeting time, overcoming adversity, and public speaking. So just to give a little bit of background as to the work that I was doing, as I mentioned, I was looking at the heat, how hot and how fast that heat moved in that material on these aircraft flying in hypersonic speeds. And what was done here is I saw 2 different, what we call a heat transfer problem. So I had temperature measurements from inside the material. These vehicles fly so fast and they get so hot that the part of the outside of the material actually recedes a little bit. So you can't directly measure how hot that material is. So instead you measure inside of it. And so what we do is we first solve how the heat is transferring between our 2 temperature measurements. And that's what we call a direct heat conduction problem. And then we can take that information and then move forward out to the external surface through what's called an inverse heat conduction problem to figure out how much heat is moving in and out of that material and how hot that material is getting. So this is the work that I was doing. It was very math oriented at the very beginning of my internship. But as I mentioned, not only did I learn the science, but I also learned how to do a lot of public speaking, because this position brought me to Europe for the first time in my life. It brought me to Cologne, Germany, and I was able to give a talk there. I gave a talk in Paris, France. I also was able to travel to the Netherlands a few times, to England, to Northern Ireland, and to Spain, as well as all across the United States, just presenting this work that I was doing. So like I mentioned, not only was I learning the science behind heat transfer and getting better at my mathematics and computer science, but I was also learning how to stand up in front of an audience with people whose their native language was different than mine, and be able to speak confidently in front of them and share my research. So moving forward in my background, as I mentioned, I then was starting to study supercomputers. But not only, again, was I learning something technical, but I was also learning how to build confidence within myself and how to seek advice from others. Because at this point, I had been in my research for quite a bit of time, and I was getting really good technically. But the more you learn, you learn that there's still so much more that you need to know. And it's really easy to get down on yourself. So I was able to take a lot of this work that I was doing and seek advice from others. So what was I doing in the first place? I was studying airplanes and sound, as I'd mentioned. That kind of led into where I'm at now. And what we did was use this thing called an acoustic liner. So on the left side of the screen, you can see a picture of an engine of an airplane sitting underneath of the wing. And inside of these engines, we can install this material called an acoustic liner. An acoustic liner is this material that helps to reduce noise. And so what I did was help to build computer models. As you can see on the right of the slide, there's a video showing. I was able to look at the sound, as you can see, coming from the wings, that basically coming from the engines, and make video simulations of how that sound moved around an aircraft. And I did this using simulations with supercomputers. And then I was able to look at different applications of these acoustic liners to see which were more effective and how we could really reduce that noise using this material inside of the engine. So technically wise, I learned a lot. But again, as I'd mentioned, I wasn't able to do a lot of the great work because I was still working on building my confidence and knowing that all of the work that I've been doing was being successful. Because in those 15 years, I had a lot of failures and a lot of successes, but I was able to really build a lot of confidence through meeting different people and doing my own research and getting more involved. And through, my time management, my budgeting skills, learning how to overcome diversity, I developed a lot of strong skills in communication, technical writing, and public speaking. But one of the biggest lessons I learned was how to feel confident in doing that and how to stand up in front of an audience and be proud of the work that I was doing. And a lot of that came from seeking advice from different mentors, teachers and classmates, and colleagues and friends. Because as I learned, a lot of the research that I was doing was very solo. I was working on my own on different projects, but a lot of us at work and through my schoolwork and teachers that I met and mentors, they all had their own different projects. They had been in those same struggles. They might not have been making biodiesel and getting gunk, but they were facing problems of their own. And so I was able to lean on the support of them to build that confidence, to get better at my research, and to be proud of the work that I was doing. So a lot of my building confidence came from seeking advice of others, which is incredibly important for everyone to do. So, what overall advice can I share? My path may seem straight over the last 15 years, but it was often more bumpy than it seemed to be on this little straight timeline I've created. But also, no two paths look the same. My journey took me through a lot of different programs. I switched my degree twice. I was at 2 different universities. I lived in 3 different states. It took me 15 years. And so I just wanted to mention, that was my timeline. My timeline is not what everyone's timeline is going to look like. And no two paths look the same. Everyone's journey is unique. Some take some time off, some, can go straight through, some are more bumpy, some do lots of twists and turns. So other than just reminding yourself to build both technical background and the confidence in your work and time management and public speaking, really the biggest thing to remember is that no two paths look the same and everyone's journey is unique, as mine will be very different from a lot of others. So in general, what does a career in STEM look like? It could be anything you want. As I mentioned, I worked on a lot of different great projects. I tested air traffic control software. I helped to build and design rockets. I was manufacturing missiles for our defense within our country. I made biodiesel, mostly poorly, but I still was able to produce some towards the end. I studied heat conduction on hypersonic vehicles. I looked at supercomputers and math, fighter airplanes. There's tons and tons of different projects that you can do. And those are just some of the projects I worked on. I know a lot of different people in the STEM world that work on completely different work than I do. So what does a career look like? It looks like whatever you want it to be. Find what you're passionate about, get excited about it, and be okay if your path moves around. Mine moved around quite often. When I first started my school 15 years ago, I had no idea I would be studying how much noise comes from an aircraft. I wanted to build and design rockets and then fly in them. So working on the aviation field can be anything you want it to be, let alone just STEM in general. So as I mentioned, my path was never straightforward, but I learned as much as I did inside the classroom as I did outside. And some of those best lessons I learned came from those failures and setbacks, as well as the advice that I received from my mentors and teammates. So to just kind of wrap it up and to give you guys with a little experiment you can do at home if you want to learn a little bit more about sound, I'm going to walk you through something you can do at home to study sound and how it moves, since that is what I'm working on now. So sound waves are what we call longitudinal waves. They need what we call a medium to travel. So there's no sound in space because space is what we call a vacuum. So for us to hear sound waves, the sound wave needs to move through a medium such as water or air. And they're longitudinal waves in that what happens is when a source makes a sound, so me speaking or stereo, what it happens is it disturbs the air particles in front, and it essentially creates like what's called pressure. So it expands and it creates basically a pressure wave. So it expands and compresses, and it moves forward until it hits your ear. And it's doing this at a speed of about 760 miles an hour. So it's moving really fast. So circling back to the hypersonic vehicles that I was working on several years ago, that's 5 times faster than the speed of sound. So sound's moving at about 760 miles an hour. That's very fast. So you can imagine just how hot those vehicles get if they're traveling 5 times faster than that. So just a quick experiment you can do at home, which will be really fun, and you can experiment with sound. There's only a few ingredients you need. It's much easier than making biodiesel, I promise. You just need a small mixing bowl, some plastic wrap or saran wrap, a rubber band, and either sugar or salt. So the first thing you want to do is you want to get your small mixing bowl or cup or whatever it is that you want to use. You want to cover it really, really tightly with that plastic wrap and secure it with a rubber band. As you can see, it's really tightly secured in my picture. Once you have the saran wrap perfectly secured and really, really tight, you just place a small amount of sugar or salt on the top. You want it to be a crystal, so you can see that in the second image. And then what you want to do is you just want to get really close to it and speak. So I have a video where I say hello 3 times. I stay the same distance away from the cup, but as I continue saying hello, it gets louder and louder and louder. And you can see what happens with the salt particles. So as I mentioned, sound is a longitudinal wave that moves by expanding and compressing the particles in front. So the louder you speak, the stronger that wave is going to be. And so it's going to vibrate those particles more vigorously the louder I get. And so when you do this experiment at home, you can experiment with how these particles move depending on how far away or how close you are, how softly or how loudly you speak. When you're closer and you speak louder, those salt or sugar particles are going to vibrate more vigorously because the sound wave, again, is moving in a pressure. The air around from where that sound wave is moving from. So from your mouth, it's creating a pressure wave that's expanding and contracting until you hit the salt particles. And the stronger that wave is, the more they're going to vibrate. So I'll play the video really quick so you can see what it is that you're looking for and you can experiment on your own.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
So as you can see, the louder I get, the more those particles vibrate. So that's a fun little experiment you can do at home. And so with that, that is all I have. apologize for going a little bit over. The audio, I think, messed us up a little bit and put us a little bit behind schedule, but there's still about 10 minutes for questions. And I have some contact information. So if anyone has further questions, you can reach out to me for any future outreach or to give a little bit more advice. I'd love to mentor and connect with students. So are there any questions for me?
Yes, we have some questions for you and also some comments.
Okay.
DeAndre De Leslie, I just graduated from ERIU in Daytona last year. You are an inspiration to all of us, and that's true.
Oh, thank
you. Career. I'm glad I attended this session.
Thank you.
Another question here. I have a few questions as well, but I'm going to ask you some questions that are from that and this first. Were you in making the stealth bomber?
Can you say that again?
Were you involved in making the stealth bomber? I'm pretty
sure. No.
But I'm asking.
No, I was not. All of the Department of Defense projects I worked on were for the Hellfire missile. So that was all I really worked on. Yeah. I've never had a security clearance, so I've never worked on anything too stealthy.
All right, another good question here. This is a really good one. Let's see what you have to say. Maybe I borrow some of your ideas in this answer. And this is, I love doing many things at once, but I've always struggled with time management. Any advice?
Yes, so I am the same way. You can ask pretty much any one of my family and friends. I just don't know how to slow down. I like to do everything. What helped me was getting a calendar book, and I now have it on my phone. When I was in college, smartphones weren't really a thing yet. So there was a little planner book that I had, and I planned out what I wanted to do each day, and I scheduled time for myself to make sure I got enough sleep. I had proper time to get exercise in, because, you know, a lot of this, you have to maintain good physical, mental, and emotional health. And so I made sure to budget everything that was important to me, making sure I had time for my classes, I had time to study, I had time to exercise, work out, had time to rest and relax. And to do that, I really rely heavily on my calendar, because even now today, I have this full-time job. I still maintain good physical fitness outside of my work, but I also tutor in the evenings. And so for me to be able to do both jobs and do them well, I schedule myself, and I do a really good job of maintaining that on my calendar. So if time management is something you want to work on, I suggest getting a notebook, a schedule planner, or to start putting things in your phone calendar to remind yourself to budget time for all the things that you need to do, and to not become too overwhelmed with all of the many projects.
Great advice. Really great advice. Another question. I have been in a cycle of applying to entry-level jobs and research positions and being rejected due to lack of experience. Can you give any advice to a student like me?
Okay, so if you're still in school, my suggestion would be to get involved in after-school activities, different clubs. You can get a lot of experience through there. If you're done your education, I would just continue applying. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get to the job that you want. And don't be afraid, you know, to take a job that's maybe not quite what you wanted to do. Because again, a lot of the things in the STEM field, there's a lot of parallels between everything. So the position that you might start with at first, maybe you're in there for 3-4 years, but you can gain a lot of experience in that position before you move to something more into more exactly what it is that you wanted to study. But so again, like if you're still in school, get involved in after school activities, try to get internships. If you're out of school, just keep pushing through. The application process is a little bit challenging, but while you're doing that, you know, you can become involved with a lot of community activities and clubs through, you know, your networking, get a lot of hands-on experience that way, as well as you continue through your application process.
Questions are popping up, and I'm gonna just read few comments to you. Thanks for sharing such as inspirational journey. From Andres, this is a comment. I'm really grateful to hear all of your trajectory, and you're truly a clear example of how hard work pays off. So thank you so much. What else do we have? Another comment. Thank you so much from Charlene EQ. But man, it's hard to keep up with the many questions now. All right, let me go for another question. What is your advice to a physics student who is an aerospace enthusiast? Where to start?
Oh, a physics student. So it's depending on your university. If there's aerospace clubs, you can get involved in those. I know, my university was an aeronautical university, so most of the students there were aerospace. But we had a lot of different clubs on campus. Some that built cars, some that worked on robots, some that worked on model planes. So if your university has different activities, even though you're, maybe not necessarily studying aerospace engineering, you can definitely get involved in aerospace related activities, especially through different clubs on campus. So that's where I would suggest. But just to mention, working as an aerospace engineer doesn't necessarily mean you need an aerospace engineering degree. My PhD is in math, but my job title is aerospace engineer. I hadn't had that job title ever until I had my degree in math. So aerospace engineering is a really well-rounded field. So we look at people with all sorts of backgrounds: mechanical, aerospace, physics, math, computer science, software engineering. So if you're really interested in aerospace, I would really seek out those clubs on campus and inside your community, because there's model rocket clubs that do launching, not necessarily at your school, but in the community at large.
Another nice question. Thank you. Your effort and hard work is marvelous. You know what? I'm going to squeeze in one question, which perhaps is important. So,
Okay.
What happened before 2006? What took you into STEM? Now, you gave us the full background between 2006 and nowadays, but what happened before? Were there any teacher behind your thrive, your dad, your mom? What happened there?
I was mostly my father, actually. So I don't quite know. My parents don't remember, but for some reason or another, they decided to send me to space camp when I was in 5th grade. They don't remember, and I was so young, I don't remember either if I had asked or if they just thought it was something I would be interested in. But my dad would watch the Discovery Channel, and I would have different shows about the planets and astrophysics on all the time. So I'm sure I probably expressed some interest in that. But when I was in 5th grade, my father and I traveled to space camp together and did a parent-child weekend. It was 4 days in Huntsville, Alabama. And when I came up from that, there was no other option for me. I was going to work for NASA, and that was it. That was all I ever thought about doing. It was my only path I ever considered taking. And luckily for me, it worked out, because I never considered working for anyone else. But so that's kind of just all I wanted to do from the time I was a young girl.
Wow. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Such an impactful experience. Nice. Awesome. Another question. We have a few more minutes. So how long did the process of making the biofuel last?
It depends on how large of a batch. It only took, if I remember correctly, just a few days. It was a really quick process. So as you can imagine, I generated a lot of waste in the failed experiments that I was doing, because you can know very quickly on if it's going to work or not. But if I remember correctly, when I made the 40-gallon batch, I think it was a 2-day process to run the experiment, and then it takes about a day or so once it's done, reacting, because of the different densities of the biodiesel and the glycerin, they settle out into two different components. The glycerin will be at the bottom. You drain the glycerin, and then you wash it with water. So it's a little bit counterintuitive, but you fill it up with water, you mix it, and you let it settle again a few times. So it's a few-day process to do, but the reaction itself, just a few hours, I believe. Okay. I mean, I have not made biodiesel since then, but it doesn't take too long. It has a lot of monitoring involved.
Okay. Another good question: does sound on a jet engine affect its efficiency?
It could affect a lot of different things. So there's when you have things that are So again, sound is it vibrates the particles around it, right? So when you're flying, if the vehicle itself if it gets really loud, or if the components vibrate too much, depending on a lot of different factors, but you have this vibration that's occurring in the material. So some folks that study acoustics look at what's called vibroacoustics. And so they're looking at the vibrations of the material itself. So I'm looking at the vibrations of the air around the plane, but there are folks who look at the vibrations of the material itself. And then that becomes a structural issue of the aircraft. So sound can affect a lot of different things, because you can imagine if you're affecting the structural integrity of the plane, it's definitely going to affect a lot of different things, not just efficiency, but the safety of the materials itself. Because if it's vibrating, if you imagine you rivets in the plane and it's going like this, those could pop out. There could be failures in the material. So there's a lot of different important things to look at when it comes to sound.
You know what? We have one more question, and the next
Okay.
session is with Raul. So Raul is a good friend, so he's not gonna get mad. I'm gonna just squeeze in a couple of questions very quickly. Thank you for going through your amazing journey. Can you elaborate on your work on heat conduction and such like?
Yes. So I breezed through that really fast. But so, when you're flying at hypersonic speeds, I think if I remember correctly, the external surface of the material, so like the fronts of the wings, the bottom of the aircraft, the nose, so the front part, these are the parts that experience the flow. They get the hottest. They can go upwards of 3,000 degrees. This is incredibly hot, and the material, it will recede a little bit. And so these materials are designed, we looked at carbon materials. These materials are designed to absorb that heat and transfer it out as quickly as possible. So much so that people who look at re-entry vehicles from different planets, the outside's like 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, but the inside of it, just a few inches, can actually form ice particles. It's so cold to the touch because these materials are so efficient at transferring that heat out. And so it's really important to know how hot the material is getting and how to transfer that heat out accordingly. And so a lot of the work that I was doing was looking at how that heat transferred through the material. And that requires, because of the mathematics of the problem I was solving, it required 2 temperature measurements. And so I took 2 different measurements. So if you imagine you have a material, like a 3-layer cake, for example, imagine you have a 3-layer cake. I have 2 different temperature probes inside where you put the icing. So in between the 3 layers. And I would be able to measure how much heat moved inside that layer. And then from that data, I was able to then propagate out to the external surface to figure out how hot the outside was. And so a lot of this work is done not only on aircraft, but on spacecraft as well, to make sure that, when the astronauts are coming in, or when we're sending multi-million-dollar products up to the International Space Station, that it remains safe, because the outside gets really hot.
Amazing. Michelle, thank you so much. An amazing,
of course.
Amazing, awesome. Thank you so much for bringing your story to Reyes. And for those of you participants, there is a new session next right after this with Raul, and then but it'll be in Spanish. It's Python in Spanish. Okay. All right. With that, have a good weekend. I'll see you then on Tuesday. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye. Good night.
Bye.